Anyone else out there that has a problem with obsessive record collecting? Hey there, it's Teddy coming to you from down in my record room with yet another obsessive record collecting vinyl orgy. Invited to this orgy are some artists and records that have a level of influence and inspiration on others. Mostly jazz records, a couple of strays mixed in there, and this isn't intended to be, an end-all, be-all in that kind of discussion. Just when I was looking at the records that I'm going to present, I sensed a commonality there. So, with all that said, let's get to it. Well, first up is an artist and an album that I have been quite obsessed with as of late, and that's from the great tenor saxophonist Warren Marsh and his 1958 eponymous release on Atlantic Records. This is a more recent reissue, and it's essentially a trio setting with Paul Chambers on bass and Paul Motion on drums. And it was engineered by the legendary Tom Dowd, so even though it's a late 50s vintage, it sounds awesome today. What else sounds awesome are the solo improvisations of Warren Marsh, just fascinating. He had his influences and inspirations, obviously. Initially, you can hear elements of Lester Young, the master musician Lester Young, and for me, all modern jazz roads lead directly back to Lester Young. More notably, he was heavily influenced by his teacher, the innovator and educator Lenny Tristano. Marsh stayed rather true to those teachings throughout his career, and moving forward, Marsh had great influence and inspiration on Anthony Braxton. Anthony Braxton refers to Marsh as the greatest vertical improviser. And in the most basic, rudimentary way I can describe it, vertical improvisation is based on harmony, and horizontal improvisation is based on melody. His improvisations are cool, very subtle on the surface, but once you dive into them, there is immense deep thinking going on. I get the feeling that at times I'm hearing the gears of his brain emanating out of my speakers. The deep thoughts are just very, very conceptual in a good way. It's not avant-garde per se. It's very, very beautiful stuff. But he messes with time, in and around time, and he also, constructs and reconstructs the melody through harmony, and that's just wonderful stuff. Incredible character as well. He stepped away from music for a while. Luckily, he came back. But he also, tragically, but in a storybook way, his life ended on stage. He had a heart attack while performing. A lot of people talk about dying in the saddle. He did. And very bittersweet, but, what a way to go out. I urge you to check out some Warren Marsh. And as I said, it's initially subtle, but as you dig into it, it's very rich and very rewarding stuff. Again, it's Warren Marsh on Atlantic Records from 1958. Very highly recommended. Well, speaking of innovation and inspiration, the bar doesn't go much higher than Mr. Ornette Coleman. And I was inspired. I want to say that it was Anthony Camplone who showed this a while back. Anthony, was that you who whipped this one out? If it was, let me know. Or if it wasn't, let me know. But I was inspired to finally seek out a vinyl version of this. I've had it digitally, and it is just one of the tops in a very, very stellar discography. It's called Chapaqua Suite. This was recorded in 1965 and was intended to be the soundtrack to a film called Chapaqua that was written, directed, and starred Conrad Rooks. It's a story about drug addiction and withdrawal and coming clean. And ultimately, Rooks found this music to be just a little bit too intense for an intense story. So he went back to the drawing board, got a hold of Ravi Shankar, and his music wound up being attached to the film. So, as I said, recorded in 1965. This is right when Coleman is coming out of his self-imposed retirement, and it features David Eisenson on bass and Charles Moffat on drums, the same group that then would travel to Europe. If you were familiar with the two live Blue Note recordings at the Golden Circle in Stockholm, it's that group, plus the addition of an orchestra. Now, they don't appear, they're not like in there full time, but they have stabs and flutterings and have a interesting complement to the trio, which really, really elevate this recording. So, as I said, it was left behind from the film, and initially released in France in 1966, and then in the UK a couple years later. This is a 1970 Japanese release, but it was never released in the United States, and I think that's the very reason why this album is not that well known. It just, people didn't see it. It wasn't in the racks, didn't get reviewed. All of that just kind of left this dying on the vine. And it is just one of his best. For me, once you get past the initial Atlantic recordings of Coleman's, this and the CBS release Science Fiction are my two favorites beyond that. As I said, he was coming off this retirement, and his playing is it's just impeccable. He is on fire, and he's clearly has something to prove. And he proves it. Just incredible. I urge you to seek this out. You will have to pay more for it. Likely you'll have to pay shipping from another country as well. In my view, worth every penny. So check it out. I think it's all online to check out and see if it's something that interests you enough to drop a few more bucks. But anyway, Anthony, if it was you, thank you, or whoever it was, thank you so very much for inspiring me to seek this out. Chapaqua Suite from Ornette Coleman. Yeah. Well, let's move over and spend some time in the quieter, innovative, and inspirational neighborhood of one Mr. George Russell. George Russell being a composer, arranger, pianist, conductor, and legendary theorist. This was a 1965 recording in Stuttgart, Germany. George Russell's Sextet at Beethoven Hall, guest artist Don Cherry. This was a time when Don Cherry was spending time in Europe and Scandinavia. This is a double album that wasn't released until 1973 on the BASF MPS label. And it features kind of a split sextet between some European and American players. Of course, you have Don Cherry, Bertil Lohengrin on trumpets, Brian Trentham on trombone, Ray Pitts, a really underrated tenor sax player, George Russell, of course, on piano, Cameron Brown on bass, and the great Albert Tootie Heath on drums, who definitely brings the swing to this session. Now, I mentioned George Russell being a theorist, and what he's really known for and has had immense influence in the world of jazz is his Lydian concept. It's a theoretical concept that he developed in the early 50s, where he devised a whole new set of scales. You know, you have major scales and minor scales, and then he has the Lydian scales, and those became kind of a foundation for modal jazz, where in modal jazz you are improvising on scales instead of changes. Bill Evans was part of early George Russell groups, and he transferred his knowledge of the Lydian concept in modal jazz to Miles Davis and the kind of blues sessions. John Coltrane also influenced Giant Steps, is just a really great example of the Lydian concept in action. At this concert, he really brings it to the forefront. He has a section in this concert that's called Lydia and Her Friends, that includes Lydia in Bag's Groove, Lydia's Confirmation, Lydia Around Midnight, and Taken Lydian Home. And so he's utilizing some famous influential jazz numbers to him, and then applying the Lydian concept to them and abstracting them out. I mean, they're not like ultra abstract. They kind of fall in between, say, Gil Evans and Charles Mingus. He's not as lush of an arranger as Gil Evans, and he doesn't have quite the searing soulfulness of Charles Mingus. But he hits a really interesting spot in between. And then having Don Cherry at this concert, introduces in 1965 another layer of modernity to the concert and the session that make this very, very appealing. So, yeah, I urge you to, in general, to check out George Russell. He has a great body of work. This album in particular is just really, really cool, with this gently abstracted theory, but then you've got a real swinging rhythm section to keep things moving. So anyway, check him out. Check this album out. George Russell Sextet at Beethoven Hall with guest artist Don Cherry on the BASF MPS label. Dig it. Well, let's move on to a more current group and current recording. The group is called Cortex. They're a Norwegian outfit, and this is an album called Live. It's a 2015 double album release on the Clean Feed Records label out of Lisbon, Portugal. And these guys make absolutely no bones about their influences and inspirations for coming together as a group. And primarily, it's the mid-60s Don Cherry recording Complete Communion. And they firmly park themselves in that mid-60s era vibe. They are a classic quintet like you would see in many Blue Note recordings of that era. You have Thomas Johansson on cornet, and he's the primary composer. Christopher Alberts on reeds, a really interesting inside-outside player. Ola Hoyer on double bass, and Gard Nilsson on drums. And as I say, they plant the flag right in the mid-60s where free expression is pushing itself further and further, but at the same time grounded rhythmically. So it's riding that line, just perfect balance between inside and outside. And this album is just a delight. Great players, interesting compositions, and wonderful improvisations that, edge out, but don't go, completely insane. It's just wonderful, wonderful blend. And these guys, are just doing a tremendous job of expressing themselves from that mid-60s platform. But it's not like they're, completely aping that. They've got their own more modern contemporary vibe with the compositions, and I'm just really impressed with what goes on over in the Scandinavian countries these days, and in Sweden in particular, with a lot of the jazz that's happening there. It's really impressive stuff, and I will definitely keep an eye on what these guys are up to. I hope they stay together and produce more work. But as I said, this album's called Live. Very well recorded, very well pressed. At times, it's really you would never guess that it was a live recording. It's that well handled. So anyway, contemporary stuff. Go out there, get it, check it out, enjoy it before it's gone, like like happens to so many things. So there you go. Cortex Live on the Clean Feed Records label from 2015. Well, let's stay in Europe. Let's stay with a live recording. And let's stay with a current release. This is the Hurrah with Evan Parker, John Edwards, and Chris Corsano. It is released this year on the Odo Roku label. This is a live recording of a several night stand by the drummer Chris Corsano at Cafe Odo in London. And this particular evening, he was accompanied by John Edwards on bass and the legendary Evan Parker on sax. And man, this thing cooks. Now, it is free improvisation. Of course, Evan Parker, having been born out of the Spontaneous Music Ensemble in London in the mid-60s, and continuing on and forging ahead with his free improvisation. John Edwards, incredible bassist who, man, he gets some sounds and textures out of the bass I have never heard before. I mean, this guy really, I mean, I don't know if it's fair to call him the the Hendrix of the double bass. I mean, that's kind of silly to say, but oh well, I said it. But yeah, I mean, he really gets some really, really interesting sounds. Chris Corsano, good Lord, he's an American drummer who, I think, he's part Tasmanian devil. I mean, this guy, if you merged Sonny Murray and Han Bennick and then threw a little gasoline and lit it, Chris Corsano. I mean, this guy just is a whirling dervish of sound, and he plays the drums differently. He'll place different blocks and stuff also on some of the drums, and just working different sounds out of the kit, almost in a similar way to the way Edwards is getting different sounds out of the bass. Strangely enough, Evan Parker might seem to be the most normal out of this trio setting, but he's mellowed a little bit, or at least he was, mellowed a little bit on this session, or this, date, live date. But yeah, no, I've been, there's a tendency to get very caught up in older recordings, and I ain't knocking that, because there's, you could spend your life exploring older recordings and, die before you ever came close to checking it all out. There's so much good stuff. But I'm trying to reach out and balance some of my purchases with newer recordings, and luckily, slowly, jazz recordings are starting to be pressed on vinyl more and more. So they're out there, not in any abundance like other genres, but they are out there. Anyway, this one is out there. The Hurrah, Evan Parker, John Edwards, and Chris Corsano on the Odo Roku label from this year, 2016. If you're into a lot of hectic free improvisation, step up to the plate. This is yours. Well, hanging in there with a live jazz trio recording for one of the greatest of all time. And that's the Bill Evans Trio, Sunday at the Village Vanguard, featuring Scott LaFaro. Yep, it is just, it's a masterpiece. There's no other word to use. It was recorded at the legendary Village Vanguard in the summer of 1961, and it was released later that year. And the reason I'm bringing this to you today is this recently has come into my possession, and it is an original mono recording on Riverside that, okay, don't hate me, it was given to me for free. Okay. Yeah. And sometimes these things happen, and most of the time they don't, but am I just like completely over the moon to have this in my collection? So, excuse me. Mwah! It is a beauty. This album is arguably the greatest live jazz recording of all time, and so therefore it is arguably one of the greatest live recordings ever. And it deserves that status. This is where the modern piano jazz trio started. To some, this may seem almost cliche because so many people copied what is happening on this record. There is a level of communication that is otherworldly between pianist Bill Evans, bassist Scott LaFaro, and drummer Paul Motion. Now, this says featuring Scott LaFaro because 10 days after this was recorded, Scott LaFaro was tragically killed in a car accident at the tender age of 25. And at 25, he was blowing the bass world apart. He was creating things technically, musically, accompaniment-wise, that had never been heard before. I don't think you had, a bass player that caused as much of a stir, not until Jaco Pastorius showed up, and that was, of course, on the electric bass. But for double bass, Scott LaFaro was taking this to places that were only his territory. And you wonder what it could have been if he had lived a full creative life and what he could have developed. And just really tragic. But we have this. I mean, if you've got to leave an epitaph behind, Scott LaFaro left one right here. It is just, it's hard. It's hard to talk about albums like this that are such masterpieces and have attained such legendary status. I urge you, I've urged you enough already, but man, I really seriously urge you, if you've never heard this or don't own this, it is 110% essential. This is clutched out of the pantheon of all-time greatness. Bill Evans Trio, Sunday at the Village Vanguard, featuring the late, great Scott LaFaro on bass. Yeah. Rest in peace, my man. Well, definitely changing gears musically, but staying in the pocket of innovators and inspirators. This is John Fahey and his 1965 release, The Transfiguration of Blind Joe Death. Now, this would probably be considered like a second pressing. The first pressing really was a private pressing of 50 records that are all hand-lettered, and I've never seen one. So this is the first of a more commercial pressing and a cover that's more commonly known. This is from Riverboat Records. It's Riverboat 1, and again, it's from 1965. John Fahey was an American guitarist who was the father of of so-called American primitive guitar. He was quite an iconoclast. He was also a label owner. He started Tacoma Records, brought other people to the forefront like guitarist Leo Kottke. But as an artist, just incredibly skilled and incredibly influential. It was a finger-picking style of guitar that utilized, borrowed from a variety of eras, countries, genres. He dipped into old-time country. He dipped into blues. He dipped into flamenco. He dipped into Indian classical. Stir it all up and come out with his own variety, his own unique sensibility. Just really, really cool. The fidelity on this is not the greatest. It was recorded partially at MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and partly in Berkeley, California, with high-end home recorders. So not the greatest fidelity, but what comes out and what you hear is clear, shining brilliance. You would think, a solo guitar record could get a little tedious. Not this one. It just, there's so much variety in here, and so much intricacy that it just never lets down and never disappoints. And if you hear this, you will hear his influence forward with other guitarists and other folk people, even across the pond, so to speak. So really, really proud to have this record, and I go to it at least once, twice a year, because it's just very, very evocative stuff. 1965, on Riverboat Records, The Transfiguration of Blind Joe Death, from John Fahey.
400 years ago, down in Mexico.
And lastly, we have arrived at an area that is a personal favorite of mine, and that's the territory where you have an artist or an album that is so unique that it is virtually uncategorizable. And that's what we have here with Terry Allen's Juarez. This is a brand new 2016 reissue on the Paradise of Bachelors label. Originally a 1975 private press that was accompanied with original artwork prints produced by Terry Allen. Terry is primarily known as a great American visual artist whose work is housed in many collections, but he's always maintained a musical side along with the visual art. And the corollary between the two is that he really is a master storyteller, both lyrically and visually. When the 1975 album came out, there were, I think it was a pressing of 50, something like that. And the intent of the music originally was to be played and accompany one of his art exhibitions with visual art that is, going along with the story that he tells within this album. And it is a song cycle, and it is a very pulpy story that's filled with sex and booze and murder and on the road travel, and it's very dark, very haunting, in that kind of Jim Thompson pulp novel realm. And so it's very unique in that regard. It's essentially Terry playing piano and singing in his very Lubbock, Texas twang, and I think because of that, he generally gets put in the country section at a record store. His album after this is his most well known. It's called Lubbock on Everything, and a lot of people consider it to be sort of proto alt country album. Although his songs and a lot of his lyrics and stories have very little to do with it. I mean, this takes place in the American Southwest and in Mexico, so people tend to place this again in kind of a country realm, but not really. It's really a unique piece. I had an opportunity back in the day. I had an original copy pass through my hands when Terry and his wife Jo Harvey were visiting artists at the art school I was going to. And being a stupid, broke art student, it didn't happen. And why I didn't go sell some plasma or some records. I'll never know, but that's the way it played out. You know, you lose some like you win some with the Bill Evans I just showed a few back. So anyway, a wonderful, wonderful package and reissue. It comes with a booklet that has reprints of some of the original artwork that came with the private press. There are lyrics and other writings by other folks, and it's just so well done. The package, the remastering, the pressing, it's just all top notch. And I'm sure that Terry Allen would not have it any other way. Just a great guy. So humble, so humorous, so intelligent. Really happy to cross paths with him at one point. I hope to again. But for now, I'll cross paths with him with this marvelous reissue of his album Juarez on the Paradise of Bachelors label, originally from 1975, private press. Well, that wraps up. Well, what are we doing here? Another Vinyl Orgy. Oh, yeah. Anyway, I want to thank everybody, new and old, again, for hanging in there with me between these long gaps that occur between my videos. It's just the way it works out, and so be it. But when I'm able to make one, I will be brutally honest with you. I love the comments. I love the dialogue that we get going with these, so I hope that that will continue. I hope that you'll be inspired to let your fingers do a little walking. So anyway, again, thanks so much. I appreciate everybody, and I really want you to do what you can to keep it in the groove. And I'll see you next time.